Morning, everyone. Hello, I'm Julia Payne. I'm director of the Hub. Welcome to Balance 10. I can hardly believe that we're on number 10 already. So today we're going to be talking about help. We're obviously, a big thing that we believe in here at the Hub is that we're much stronger together, but knowing how to ask for help can be really tricky, and often knowing how to offer the right kind of help at the right time can be trickier still. So today we're going to be talking about all of those sorts of things, and obviously in the context of easing of lockdown restrictions, where there's more change and we're all having to relearn things that we perhaps just did very naturally before. So lots to unpick today. To help me unpick that is Andy Gibson, my erstwhile Balance co-host. Andy, hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Good,
Can I
thank you.
help you with anything? You're right.
Well, only if I can help you.
Oh, okay, thank
Maybe we can help each other. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us today.
you.
Um, so Andy, I'm just going to dive straight in. And you know I love a science question, and anyone that has been to a balance talk before will know that as well. So I talked earlier about the fact that we're coming into this conversation off the back of lockdown restrictions easing, that sort of thing. But lots of us have been kind of isolated, certainly professionally, for the last 12 months or so. And so I know that you've been looking into the research around the impact that isolation has on our minds and how that might be affecting our ability to kind of help each other and communicate. So I wondered if you could just kind of give us a quick insight into that research and what it says.
Yeah, I suppose you may have seen over the last year there's been quite a lot of articles written about what lockdown's doing to us and the kind of the risks of it, and sometimes links to people saying we shouldn't lock down because look at the consequences for our mental health. Often, particularly in the case of politicians, people who've never cared about mental health before, but suddenly become tremendously interested in it. But there is definitely a trade-off, and it is important to acknowledge that we're aware that there are consequences of these lockdowns. It's not that we're just doing it and thinking it'll all be fine. But I think it is important to talk about the downsides because we need to manage them. We need to figure out ways to compensate from this. But I suppose particularly the consequences of being cut off from each other, there's different aspects to why that's problematic, and it's particularly intense at times when there is a crisis, when there's a lot of threats and problems around. That's when we feel it most, because actually it's when there is some kind of threat or problem that is exactly when we want to get together with each other. So the principle is called tend and befriend, that we seek out other people to get comfort and to feel like we're in this together. So that's why particularly in the early days of the lockdown there was a lot of effort to try and make sure we did feel like we were in it together. We weren't just alone with this big problem. It was our neighbours, our society, the whole global efforts to get the vaccine created and all of that. So there's been a lot of that kind of response to stress, but the specific things around how being cut off from people, particularly those who live alone, who've had this very, very extreme experience of being physically just completely cut off from people, that it affects us in various different ways. I suppose the three hormones, the three chemicals to think about are oxytocin, dopamine, and cortisol, which the oxytocin is often talked about as the love drug or the hug hormone. It's a hormone that's released when you have close contact with people, when you're physically with people. So just hugging people, being with family, with loved ones, that sort of closeness. A lot of it's to do with bonding between family members, sort of how we bond with kids and in couples. So it's not to say that we all need to hug each other all the time, but that sense of physical proximity and physical contact is an important part of our psychological makeup, and has odd effects as well, actually, that actually sometimes it can also create tribalism. We get so bonded to each other and we feel betrayals more deeply if it's someone we've got that close bond with. So it's not all just we need to pump ourselves full of oxytocin, but it is about trying to find ways to get that sense of being close to people, because what it does is reduce stress. It helps us to feel calm and relax and help us to recharge. So some of it is about finding ways that you can still feel physically connected to people, because the screens are not necessarily enough. Another part of it is just stimulation. The dopamine side of it is just we're used to getting interesting things from people, and so some of that can be achieved by Zoom and by connecting with people remotely, but a lot of it's just about that feeling of people around that keep you alert, keep you awake. So it's one of the theories about why people are drinking more, and is that we're going to miss the dopamine hits, we're missing the excitement, we need something to kind of stimulate our minds. And the third thing is just in terms of stress and cortisol, it's obviously a very stressful time. There is some quite interesting research that suggests that we feel loneliness and isolation as a threat, that it's not just sad or bad for us, we feel it as a sort of a threat to our well-being. And so the way that we react to being isolated can actually be to become stressed and anxious about it. So if you've had the experience of finding that you're, in theory, there's nothing to worry about, you're just sitting around on your own and there shouldn't be anything to feel anxious about, but you feel nervous, some of it is that response of feeling like it's not just that I'm, sitting around having some me time, it's that I'm worried that there isn't anyone around, and that feels scary. So some of it's about reassuring ourselves that we do have those connections when we need them, that there is help around, so that we don't feel that sense of worry about it. But I'm curious to know, I mean, we've seen lots of people talking about this, the isolating effects of working from home, but also being cut off from loved ones, from friends, and the sort of the desperate desire to go and just sit around in a park with people. And I went to the pub on Friday night and we all got frostbite, and I'm pretty sure I lost a toe, but it was worth it because I've missed people so much, but I'm curious to know what you're seeing in particularly with the people that you're talking to, the action learning and all the organizations you're working with. Are we all going slowly, into isolation sickness? What do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, we've talked a lot, haven't we, over the last year and a bit, about how different everybody's experiences are, throughout lockdown. And my sense is that the same is true as we kind of come out of lockdown, or at least start to, in different parts of the country. And so, I mean, it's really interesting. I don't think there is a kind of one size fits all response to that. I think, it's a very personal thing, what we're all going through. So I think I'm seeing everything from, what it's like when you have even just a week off from work, and you come back, oh God, what is it I do again? So I think we're seeing quite a lot of people who've been furloughed, semi-furloughed, or partially furloughed, or whatever variety of furlough they've been experiencing, coming back to work and thinking, can't really remember how I do this, or God, did I really get up at this time every morning, or and so there's stuff around. I think just people just en masse. I think I don't know if it was you that I was talking to about this last week. It's almost like the whole country is going back on some kind of it's a bit like Freshers Week, but everybody in the whole country is experiencing this idea of kind of going back. We're all doing it together at the same time, so the whole country's got a bit sort of a bit sort of tipsy turvy.
Well, I suppose as well, we similarly have nothing to talk about as well, just like Freshers Week. How have you been? I've done nothing. How have you been? I've done nothing as well. Great.
What grades did you get? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there is a bit of that. Yeah, there's a bit of that. I think we've forgotten how to work, but also, oh gosh, so I'm gonna have to give my evenings up again because I work in a venue, and that venue is going to be opening. So some of that going on. But I think, and that's for people who are going back and can see that, know the lights are going to be switched on in their venue and that sort of thing. But equally, I just think there are huge swathes of the industry still who just don't know what is going to happen. That uncertainty, whether it's because the week's notice at the different stages of lockdown, we won't know until a week before whether we can reopen. People that are booking tours for September still don't know if those are going to happen. So I think there's still an enormous amount of sort of uncertainty out there. And then I think at one extreme as well, there's also this is there a future for me in this sector? I still don't know. I don't know what this sector is going to look like. Is it going to have shrunk? By how much? That sort of thing. So I think there's just lots of different things going on, and so you can have a different conversation with every single person. Everybody will be saying something slightly differently.
It's funny as well, because work, I suppose, drags us out, and it can be frustrating, particularly if you're working in the evenings or you have to commute a lot. But it is a sort of background rhythm that means we do have to see people, we have to engage with the world. So there is a sort of background benefit to it. It's quite hard actually. There's questions in the chat about how you can kind of mitigate this. You can do things to calm yourself. You can do things to stimulate your mind and learn things. So learning stuff, doing hobbies, but it's quite hard to replace that oxygen oxytocin connection, that's the bit that is quite tricky to do without actually just finding ways to be with people. So, just whatever you can do to try and connect is the important bit. But the work kind of forces you to. You think, oh, I really don't want to see anyone today. I just want to stay in bed, but I've got to go out because I've got to earn money. And then you see your colleagues and you think, oh, I feel a bit better now. So swings and roundabouts.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great. I can see a few people putting some stuff in the chats, but if you've got in the chat, but if you've got any thoughts on, if you want to let us know what you're struggling with at the moment, as I said, it's very sort of particular. But I suppose the other thing, we talked a little bit about this last time, Andy, as well, is kind of this fear of going back and just the worry that some people have about, I'm going to be at a different place to the place that my clients in or my employers in, and so their expectations about what might be normal to expect from me will be different to mine. So there's that going on as well. And then I think equally, and we touched on this a little bit last time as well, like people just worrying that they're going to slide back into all the things that they did perhaps not quite so perfectly as they wanted to last time, whether that's overworking or whatever it might be, just this fear that you're going to kind of slide back and the things that you've learned from the last year are going to kind of just disappear.
Well, and yeah, particularly around socializing, sort of trying to remember how to make small talk with strangers. It's not that's one of the things that has been really missing for us, I think, is we've kept up with close friends and family through the digital tools. We've made an effort to see people, but it's those people you used to walk past in the corridor, or the person in the cafe that you used to say hi to in the morning, and the kind of the weaker links, the people that we don't know well enough to have their number, or say let's have a Zoom call to catch up. Those are the people we need to relearn, particularly how to hang out. But it's surprising how easily we do adjust. And it's from comments in the chat as well, that you kind of have this moment of thinking, I don't know if I can remember how to do this, but then it does kick in, it does come back to us, because these habits are so ingrained. We've known this for so many years. It's not like we forget just by not doing it for a while. So it should be okay. We hope. Either that, we just sit in awkward silence drinking until we feel better. It's fine too.
Hopefully it's like riding a bike. I wanted to ask you as well, so we were talking about this kind of readjustment and things like that, and I'm certainly aware that there are some things that some things that are just going to take a little bit of getting used to, and that I'm going to have to probably call on some people. This idea that I can't do it all on my own. There are going to be some things that I'm going to need help with. But so I'm just wondering, I'm somebody that doesn't particularly like asking for help. I find it quite tricky. But before we get onto that whole thing about how we can ask for help and feel more comfortable with that, I just wanted to just pause a little bit and think about how we can begin to identify the sources of support that we might need over the coming months, because it can really help kind of to put things more sharply into focus. Oh, I can't cope is much easier. It's much harder to deal with than these are the specific things that I'm finding it difficult to do at the moment. So what can we do to identify that support that we're going to need, do you think?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Often what we experience is just a feeling of feeling overwhelmed, and it's quite hard to drill into it. And I've often seen this with people, particularly when we're stressed, is someone will say, how can I help? And they just go, I don't know. And it's just really hard to articulate, actually, if I had this, then this would be easier. And some of it relates back to things we talked about before, about stress and pressure, that feeling of trying to identify which actual things that you care about feel overwhelming. So it starts with knowing what matters to you, what your motivations are, what you care about. And if you're worried, for example, about not being able to talk to people, or saying the wrong thing, or people thinking you're rude, or it might be that you're worried about feeling ill, and you go out and you feel ill, or maybe that you're worried about catching COVID, or that people won't be careful around you. But trying to drill into what is the thing that you want to happen, what is the thing that you're attached to that you think it matters. That's part of it. And the other thing is when our resources are threatened, we feel worried as well. So some of it's about identifying what you want to keep safe, and what you don't want to lose, what you think is important. And so some of this, I think, is about just trying to check in on what do you feel you need control over, what do you want to happen, and which parts of all that feel a bit beyond your capacity to sort it out yourself. And if you can ask people for specific help, to say, actually, I'm a bit worried about this, any help with this specific thing, that's a lot easier for people to help you with than just feeling overwhelmed. But I would also add that one of the things that we can do to help each other is talk these things through. So I don't want people to feel like you have to have a perfect specific ask in order to go and ask for help. One perfectly legitimate thing to do is to say, I feel overwhelmed and I'm not sure why. And actually the thing we need help with is figuring out what help we need. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing that other people might be able to help you with. One of the things we tell people when we talk to people about how to support people in work, or support, being a supported manager, for example, is the idea that it may not be that you're the best person to help, but that doesn't mean you just go, oh, I don't know, mate, and just wash your hands of the person. What your job is to help them figure out what help they need and go get it. So, going to the GP with a friend to help them explain what's going on with them, or being the person who helps you talk it through to figure out what actually you do need to feel like you're okay to go back to your job. And that's absolutely fine too. We don't need to have all the answers. We can be around to ask the questions together.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there to unpack, isn't there? I mean, I think from my point of view, what you were saying about knowing what's important to you, I think I would also add, coming from a sort of the position of helping people with think about their careers and everything, it's like just having a sense of, okay, well, what do I want the next few months to look like? That picks up on what's important to you. What's the plan for the next few months, ideally? What do I want those months to do? And then, okay, so if I want to get there, and you use that as the inspiration, then what do I need to do? Oh, okay, well, if I want to do that, then there are a few things that I'm not going to be able to do on my own. Okay, well, who could help me with that? And that feels like quite a positive. That's about sort of asking for help in the context of moving forward in a positive. So I think that's one of the things that really helps me think about asking for help, is just, okay, well, this is an act of positivity. I'm trying to move forward, and there are people that I can help, that can help me with that. I just wanted to pick up as well on what you said about not needing to have all the answers as well. We do a lot of action learning, and that is all, like you were saying, is just about having a conversation, helping somebody else to kind of figure it out as well. So I think that's a really valid point that you made as well. I'd love to know in the chat, if people are up for doing this, what stops you from asking for help, even when you really know that you need it. I suspect we probably have quite a few people with us today who find it easier to help than ask for help. So it would be great to get a bit of that going in the chat. And I was reminded, when I was thinking about this session, Andy, about the Charlie Mackesy book, the Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. I don't know if you come across it. That's really lovely.
It sounds like exactly my kind of book. So
it's really lovely. It's this little quote. So a boy is talking to the boy's talking to the horse, and he says to the horse, "What's the bravest thing you've ever said?" And the horse says, "Help." And then goes on to talk about, asking for help isn't giving up; it's actually refusing to give up. And I could barely say that without wanting to have a good cry. I just think that's such a lovely sentence. I wish I'd come up with that sentence. But that sort of speaks to that idea of help, asking for help being a positive thing, rather than something that you should feel worried about or slightly ashamed about. So on that note, how can we get better at asking for help, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, that idea of seeing help as a failure or a vulnerability. I think it's often the other way around, that actually the really vulnerable thing is to struggle on without getting the support that you need, and that's often what causes all the problems. I've had this a lot when talking about men's mental health, that actually men are reasonably good at seeking health support, actually, except when it comes to mental health. We tend to be a lot worse on that side of things. A lot of the culture of how we're taught about what's acceptable and how to deal with emotions. But it does feel like something that kind of flipped in my head was talking to people with military background about one of the things that you have to train soldiers to do is to flag when they've got a problem and seek help and support. Because if they go around pretending that they're fine, then they let down other people in the squad, and then that can cause problems. So a big part of being an effective soldier is to make sure that you look after yourself and that you remain at good capacity to be able to do the things that you need to do. So it's a way of flipping that around, as seeing my responsibility is to be good at things, not to do it all on my own, but to use the tools I've got, including the help that I can get. And I saw comments about shame in the chat as well, which I think is another thing that comes up a lot with this. But sometimes it's about being clear about what you need. If you're worried that actually you need help doing your job and you feel like, I should know how to do this, I don't want to ask for help with it. One way to approach that is to think, actually, you don't know whether you can do your job. It's not that you definitely have hit a wall with it and you think, I'm completely overwhelmed with this, I'm bad at this. What's actually often happening is we're just not sure whether we're going to be all right. So the question to ask is perhaps more like, I feel like I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do this. I kind of need to talk through how I might approach it to remember how, or I need a bit of a confidence boost. That's the help I need, rather than I need training to do my job. I need a bit of a confidence boost to feel like I'm going to be all right here. And if you can be a bit more specific about it, you don't have to say, I'm a failure, just help me. However, you can say, I feel like I'm a failure, and can you help me figure out like what I need to remember to get back to how I used to feel about this? It feels a little bit easier, I think.
And I think that's probably something that's really valid at the moment, that kind of lack of confidence, because we've all, lots of us haven't been doing the thing that we used to do. We were talking the other day about getting on a train and how weird that felt and how complicated suddenly it felt, going through the barrier and thinking about all those things. So that lack of confidence, I think, is something that people will I think a lot of people will be feeling at the moment. I wanted also to just pick up on something that has come up in a few other talks that I think a couple of people have mentioned in the chat as well, which is this idea about kind of reputation. So in the creative sector, lots of people freelancing, that sort of thing. I certainly feel like, most of the days when I'm working for clients, I have to show up and be the best version of that, because they're paying me to be, to do stuff with them that they can't do on their own. So you can't not be ready. You can't not be on, if you like. But linked to that, this idea that if you ask for help, then you're in some way incompetent or incapable, and that's a really tricky situation to be in if you're a freelancer. But maybe you're struggling just with the culture of the organization that you're working in, or you just don't know your way around the systems. So is there any tips for thinking about that?
Well, I suppose some of it, what we haven't talked about, is who you ask for help. And so part of it is about having a wide network of people that you can call on for help with different things. You don't necessarily want to go to a client and say, I need help remembering how to do my job, but you could easily go to someone in an action learning set, a mentor, a coach, a friend, so have a lot of, I think the skill of, sustaining a freelance career is to build your own support network. We don't have the support of occupational health and HR and workplace wellbeing programs. We have to find these things for ourselves, but we can absolutely build that network out so that you think, actually, I'm struggling with confidence. I've got a friend who's really good at that bit, or I'm worried that my technical skills are getting out of date, but I do have a friend who's really good on that, and I can talk to them about it. But I think the overall pattern with a lot of this is about trying to see this as giving people an opportunity to help, rather than feeling like you're imposing. Because I think a lot of the themes I hear is people feeling like, I don't want to bother people, everyone's stressed, everyone's busy. And actually the being able to say to someone, there's a thing that you're really good at and I'm not so good at it, and I wonder if you'd be able to help me with it, is actually a very nice thing for people, particularly if they feel overwhelmed and like they're terrible at everything. To be asked, could you help me with this because I think you're good at it, is actually quite a nice feeling, that sense of being allowed to give a contribution. And the other thing I wanted to make sure we mentioned is that something that's quite clear is compassion comes very naturally to us. So when you ask someone for help, the natural instinct is for people to think, oh, I wish you well, I want to help you, I want to do something for you. So it's not like you're pushing at lots of closed doors. You ask for help and people are like, no, stupid, that's ridiculous to ask for help. Our compassionate instincts are very deeply entwined in our nature, that it's part of our evolutionary background to care for each other, form families, look after each other, to see that we've got this common strength. It comes from the animal world as well. There are even examples of fair-mindedness in monkeys, for example. You give monkeys an unfair distribution of bananas and they feel bad for their fellow monkeys who haven't got as much, and they share it out. So it turns out monkeys are communists. No one saw that coming. But the thing that's really important about it is that compassion comes more easily to us when we feel safe. So what can happen is when we all feel busy, we all look around, we think everyone else is busy, I can't ask for help. But what that does is it makes you feel like you haven't got support yourself. And then when someone else asks you for help, you think, well, I haven't got time for that. I haven't even got my own stuff together. And so it is about trying to get over that hump and think, actually, part of what I'm doing by asking for help is I'm trying to get myself sorted out so that I can also help other people. It's not like you're just passive recipients of help. Asking for help is part of being good at giving help, and it's part of a wider system.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The thing that you mentioned at the beginning there about people wanting to help. You know, you talk about that. You know, this is a terrible thing to admit. But when I realised that actually people want to help, and so by asking them for help, I'm making them feel better in some way, because they'll think, great, I've been able to help. That is the thing that's most likely to get me to ask for help, because I'm like, oh, it's actually helping them. But it's true, isn't it? We're all hardwired, or most of us are hardwired to want to be helpful. And I think the other thing that I draw on when I'm struggling a little bit with the asking for help thing is to just think, well, what would they want me to do? Would my friends or my colleagues want me to struggle on with this thing, or would they want me to ask them? And I know what if it was the other way around, I would want them to ask me. So that's the other thing that I draw. And so it's like, well, am I being sensible? This isn't sensible, is it? Because they want me to help. So I find that quite helpful as well. You know, asking yourself what would people want me to do?
Yeah, definitely. We might talk at some point about compassion as well, but like the compassion that we feel for other people, that desire to help people, it's not like we are exempt from that as well. And we are entitled to live well and to feel free from stress and to enjoy our work and all the rest of the things that we wish for other people. And so if we would help someone else with that problem, we should also feel okay about asking for help ourselves with that problem. And I think a lot of it does end up being about that feeling that we often forget ourselves in our assessments of what people deserve. But if something that I've talked about a bit with, you know, in political context, is that if your goal is to make sure that poor people have good facilities, have an opportunity, then it's problematic if you're also then sort of angry at other people who've got that, because that's kind of the model you're working towards. You kind of want to celebrate that and let's get everyone into that. But it can feel like, oh, I'm not really allowed to enjoy my life because there's people who aren't. And we often end up creating this sort of martyr feeling, like in order to be loyal to these people who need help, I must suffer because they are suffering. But often what that does is it robs you of the ability to help them effectively. And I used to joke that I'm a social entrepreneur, which means that I give my time and my money to help other people, but I have no time and I have no money, so I'm not very useful. And part of the skill of being a social entrepreneur is you need to get more money and you need to get more time, because then you can help people better. And so it's all perfectly reasonable to think, what do I need? What do I want in order to be well, to be happy?
Yeah, look after yourself so you can look after others. The kind of, you know, the kind of airline message. The
gas
as well.
mask. The mask analogies are so much more portable now. You don't have to travel on a plane at all. You just need to go to the supermarket.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing as well, and I want to come back in a minute. I'm just saying this so that I said it to you, so that where we come back to it, there are lots of talk in the chat about fixers. So we should definitely talk about people who like to fix things in a second. But the other thing that I try to do is, well, I'm not very good at doing this. It's often my friends who remind me about this when I go, oh God, I'm really stuck on something. They will say to me, well, think about how much you help people. And there's this idea of, I don't want this to feel like it's about a transaction, but it's reciprocity, isn't it? Yeah, I can help you with something and you could help me with something else. You know, it's just this kind of reciprocity, and help makes the world go around as much as money does. And I love that model, because it's this idea that I've been talking about quite a bit this week of, you know, my common sense is somebody else's real light bulb moment of inspiration. And we all have those bits of common sense, or those things that we just take for granted, that to other people are pure gold, and we just miss them because they're hidden in plain sight. So thinking about how much you help each other and what you can do to help people with, I think is another thing that can unlock your ability to feel better about asking for help, I think.
Yeah, and the idea of community, I think, is quite a misunderstood word, but the idea of it is shared wealth. Comes from munus, money. And so the idea of having shared wealth, it means that if you are doing well, it benefits me because we are all part of a community together. And if you see yourself as part of a community of people who are all trying to lift each other up, then it feels less transactional and a bit more like we're all just pooling our resources, and becomes almost a question of like, how can I be useful to my community? What skills do I have to offer? How can I support people because I know that I'm getting support from them in return? You get that virtuous circle. So I mean, I'm still I have a lot of American friends, some of whom do not believe that things like the NHS are sensible. They think they're communist plots because not quite sure why. Fox News, I guess. But I keep coming back to it as possibly the greatest thing that this country's ever done, because the idea of a whole group of people who argue all the time, and probably half of whom don't like the other half and all the rest of it, agreeing that they're going to all look after each other's health together, and we see that as a collective act, takes such a degree of trust and kind of overcoming those tribal boundaries, those fears that we're not going to get enough back, and you can see what you can achieve with it. You get this much richer capacity to solve problems by feeling that actually we are in this together, and it's okay that I'm giving into it, and it's okay also to ask for help from it, because both of those things are part of being part of this shared collective that's all in each other's interests.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing sort of linked to that idea of community, that one of the I'm sure lots of people on this call will have the same thing, but I have a kind of a shelf load of projects, things that I really, really want to make happen, but haven't quite got round to doing so at the moment. And one of the things that we're going to be moving forward with this summer is a bartering platform, or certainly kind of testing the sort of feasibility of a bartering platform, which would enable people to, in the creatives, to kind of trade with each other. So I don't know, I'm a piano tuner, and I could come and tune your piano, and then I would earn a credit for doing that, and I could spend that credit having somebody help me with some website problems that I've got, that sort of thing. So this kind of idea of not just direct kind of trading with each other, but this kind of credit-based system, which is based on helping each other. So we're going to be looking into that in the summer, and just looking at the kind of business model, testing how much of an appetite there is for that. But linked to that also, I'm very keen to look at how that can work in a local context as well. We've been doing loads of stuff online, but I have this dream of all around the country, little kind of summer schools or weekend kind of creative industries courses starting, or night school or something like that, where nobody pays to go to it, and the curriculum is just based on what we can all contribute. So we're all both student and teacher, and so those are two things that kind of speaks to the idea of reciprocity and helping each other, and and I'm really motivated by stuff like that. So I would love to, I'm sure I'll be picking people's brains about that across the summer, but I just wanted to mention that as an aspiration and see what people thought about it.
Yeah, and there's I guess an interesting angle on that is, if you ever read the book *Sapiens*, Yuval Noah Harari, that one of the key things that he thinks is kind of critical to our evolutionary development and development of modern civilization is the capacity to believe in things, because what it does is it connects us beyond our immediate tribe. You can feel a connection to somebody who you've never met because they share the same loyalty to a cause or belief in an idea. And so you see a lot of this kind of helping behaviors united around the idea that we all believe in this, we all care about this. So, for all kinds of different settings, from online communities and Twitch streamers through to political parties and church groups. But the principle that often helps bind those things together is a feeling that everyone's somehow connected around something that we all think is important, or that we think it matters in the world. And then you feel like, oh, actually, I don't mind helping this person out because they're kind of on my team. They're all helping us to get to this thing we're trying to do, And so those rallying points, I think, become really important.
And then picking up what Claire said in the chat, that balance that, obviously, we were just talking about, you need to look after yourself first. So, don't give so much to something that you're absolutely run ragged yourself. So yeah, I
can't also resist mentioning this comment in the chat that's just coming because it's too good. That Gelly says I missed that bit because the person I asked for help from just rang to tell me she again cannot help. So it's not perfect. Sorry about that.
Kelly, put in the chat the thing you need help with. We've probably got somebody on the call today who could help with that. So let's see. That's the other thing I suppose you could do in the chat, is just write down anything you need help with, and we'll see if we could get a little bit of, it's like kind of swap shop, but with helping. I feel like, I don't know, you have to be Keith Chegwin, Andy, and I'll have to be Maggie Philbin. So, but yeah, let's see if we can do some
It's where
swapping.
it's where we were always headed, to be honest.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when we started to, I mentioned that fixes have come up in the chat. People saying that, you know, people who like to give advice and they tell you to solve how to solve the thing that it isn't even actually what you've asked for help with. So I wanted to just move us on a little bit and think about how can we best help people, especially the people that you know, who finally plucked up the courage to ask for help. So you don't want to mess it up, do you? Because they've summoned every kind of ounce of inner drive to kind of ask for help. So how do we what can we do to make sure that we're giving the right kind of help and in the right way?
Yeah, it's a broad question because there's lots of different types of help. So one thing we often talk about in our sessions on supporting people is to talk about helping behaviours, which is I think it's Anne Maguire is the person who we often cite, that they talked about 4 different types of help. So you can have casual helping and emergency helping, the first 2, and that's casual helping is, I used to give the example of lending someone a pen, but now I think a better example is reminding someone that they're on mute. It's that sort of quick little moment where you can just point something out to somebody, or give them a hand with a thing, and it solves a problem. And then there's emergency helping, which is a bit more urgent, so calling an ambulance for someone. The thing that's distinct about them is they don't create relationships, so you're not obliged to follow up with someone after you lend them a pen and go, how was the pen for you? Did it meet your needs? Any comments and feedback for me on my pen choices? Nor are you required to go with someone in an ambulance and check in on them and go visit them in hospital. You do a thing and then that's the end of your commitment. Well, I think where people struggle more is the other 2, substantial helping and emotional helping. And that's because it's more relationship based. Substantial helping would be like helping someone move house, or typing up minutes for somebody, you know, these kinds of things which require a bit of effort, but they come in the context of a commitment or some loyalty to each other, some sense of responsibility or community. But I don't want to tell you how to help someone move house, because a lot of these are just too specific, but it's that a lot of that is about just finding a simple thing that you know you can do and making the time to do it, and checking it was done right. The bit that we tend to focus more on is emotional helping, which is the bit that we struggle with a bit more, when someone's not quite sure exactly what they need, where they just need a friend, they need somebody to help them feel better. And we tend to kind of look for the substantial helping. We look for the things that we can do that will just mean, well, would it help if I just did the washing up, or, you know, whatever. It's not, but often what people are looking for is something a bit more human than that. And there's lots of different theories about this, and counselling training goes into a lot of the basics, but I'll pick out 3 particular things to focus on. One thing, if someone needs help and they're upset, or they're not quite sure what they need, one thing to do is to set expectations, to be clear what you can do and keep those promises, because it's important for building trust. So you need to know that if someone says they'll do something, they will do it, even if it's small. And also the flip side of that means that you need to be willing to say, I can't do this, and I'm sorry, I still care, but I don't have the capacity to do that particular thing. And this is a thing that therapists will do. They will set up very clear expectations when you come for therapy of, I will be here at this time every week, and if you call me at other times, then I won't answer, because I'll be with other people giving them my undivided attention. And it causes friction often, but it creates that sense of this person has explained the rules and makes good on their promises. Second thing is, let people be unhappy. Because I think we often end up thinking, I want to help this person feel better, but then we get frustrated when they don't feel better, or we see that our job is to try and cheer them up. So classic one is someone saying that whenever they're sad, their friend tries to take them out dancing, and she doesn't want to go dancing. She wants to stay in and cry and feel sad. But it's so painful for the friend that she is upset, that her friend is desperate to make her stop being upset, and it becomes more about the friend than about her. So allow people a bit of space to just feel bad, you know. And then the third thing is try to build up people's sense of capability, because we often try to solve problems for people, but actually a lot of this is about helping people realize that they have more power, more capability than they might realize. It's very easy to start thinking I'm terrible at everything, but reminding people, actually, I believe you can do this, because I remember that thing that you did which I thought was really difficult, and that sense of trying to build up people's capacity. So this is where tough love comes in, that people often misunderstand this as tough love means telling people to sort themselves out, but actually a better way of thinking of it it is reminding people that they have the capabilities to sort themselves out, making them feel good about themselves, not slapping them around for being rubbish. There's a real trick to making people feel like, actually, maybe I do have the resources I need to do this. So those would be my 3 tips. We've got a tip sheet as well with a lot more on those, but that, yeah, set clear expectations, and try to allow people to feel what they want to feel, and build people up and make them feel more capable. If you do those 3, that's a good start.
And I guess there's something about just asking as well, particularly at the moment, we're all supposed to be, giddy with excitement that things are going back to some kind of normal or headed in that direction. But I'm guessing also, just asking, just checking in with people, asking how you're feeling. Because if you're feeling rubbish, sometimes you don't have the energy to ask for help or to tell people that you're feeling rubbish. You just need them to be alert, I guess. Just little acts of kindness, I suppose, isn't it, really?
Yeah, the kind of the privacy of that as well. So asking questions is good, but not forcing people to answer, not putting people on the spot. That sense of just, I'm here if you need me. I'm interested in how you're doing. And the Samaritans call it befriending. So this idea that you're not there to solve a problem, you're there to be on their side, to make them feel like there's somebody who cares about whether they're all right or not. And that, a lot of that is what we need. It's not so much that we need someone to come in and sort the problem out, but it's nice to know that someone else is concerned for us and hopes that we're going to be all right, and checks in to see how's it going. That's often the thing that gives us that sense of, oh yeah, maybe I can solve that problem.
Yeah, there was another little message in there about, I think it was it Rachel or Claire, saying that she just got a friend that she could just text and say, I'm feeling rubbish, and they'll reply saying, sorry to hear that. There's no problem solving, there's just, I'm with you. I'm also, and we've talked about that a little bit over the last year, haven't we, as well? This idea of sometimes there's just solidarity and knowing that you're not the only one. Sometimes it can really help to know that other people are going through it. I wanted to pick up on that thing that you said about giving them control, because we've been doing a lot of action learning. Some people in the group will be in action learning sets that we're running at the moment, and action learning is it's like having a team of coaches working with you. So you meet up in a session, and there are 6 or 7 other people in your group with you, and their job is just for the hour where you bring your problem to or your opportunity to the group, is just to be there for you and to help. We're all just trying to help this one person. It's like having a kind of 8 people holding a safety net underneath you. It's really lovely, but there's no advice giving, absolutely no advice giving. So for an hour, all you can do as a member of that set who's trying to help this other person is ask them questions. And it's exactly what you were talking about, Andy, this idea of just helping them to kind of feel like that they're in control, asking them to think about it themselves and how they might, what you're really trying to do is to sort of disrupt their thinking. And it's so powerful. It's like magic. It's just transformation. You can literally see people kind of having thoughts for the first time. They've never had these sorts of thoughts before. So not everybody can be in an action learning set, but I would say that one of the things that can be really useful is just to think, okay, I'm not going to ask any advice. I'm not going to give any advice. It's really, really hard, particularly if you're someone who is used to having people come to you for advice. It's like almost like sit on your hands and think, okay, I'm just going to ask questions, and I'm going to ask really open questions. So, nothing like questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no. Are you feeling okay? Yes or no? Instead, you would say, how are you feeling? And that can just be so helpful, because that gives people that agency. And somebody mentioned in the chat this idea of cheerleading, and we often talk in action learning about so you ask questions, and at the end of the conversation, you're allowed to offer reflections. And we talk about those reflections either being about cheerleading. Just want to say, you said that you were feeling not very confident about this, but you've totally got this. Or you kind of just gently challenge them to think slightly differently. And it's not advice, it's just, I noticed this, and I wonder if you might want to spend a bit of time thinking about that. So I would just really recommend the asking questions approach to kind of helping people. It's really powerful.
Yeah, some of this is just about perspective shifting. It's helping people put their attention on something that they might not otherwise have thought about. And we're never seeing the full picture. We're always seeing a little particular cut through it. And so talking it through with other people, often they go, well, what about that? Or this reminds me of this other thing. Is it similar to that other thing you did? And you think, actually, yeah, no, it is. I hadn't thought about that. And so, yeah, a lot of this, I think, is about being aware that our own perspective on our problems is always limited, and actually sometimes the best thing that people can do to help us is just to be curious about it and want to find out and understand it, and that helps us all understand it. We kind of, I remember I was in Action Learning Sets years ago when I was at the School for Social Entrepreneurs, way long time ago, and that was one of the things we got from that, the action learning process of just realizing that actually people asking you questions that you haven't thought of. I'd recommend trying to get money out of venture capitalists as well. The same basic principle. They ask really good questions and you go, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, right. I need to go and do some research, but it is just that feeling of like, oh yeah, we should know the answer to that. And we don't, is quite a helpful thing to do for people. The other thing I'd say as well about School of Social Entrepreneurs is I realized that a lot of what they were doing was taking people who just cared about the people they wanted to help and trying to make it clear to them that actually in order to help people, they needed to look after themselves. So just having everyone in a group turn to you and go, we want to help you, talk us through what you're stuck with, was an extremely important moment in going, oh yeah, okay, they're helping me because they want me to succeed in the thing I'm trying to do. And so I believe the thing I'm trying to do is important. I guess I must be important. Okay. So I think that shift as well was just seeing that people have got the time and the interest is really powerful.
Yeah. We said that we would talk a little bit about communication. And I was just struck by, people talking about, I've got a friend who tries to fix things and things like that. So if you are, if you're in that situation, or if you can see that a friend or a colleague is trying to help you, but they're just not quite nailed it, what's the best way to kind of communicate? Communicate not only that the help they're giving you isn't quite right, but to communicate what you think you might need. How do we go about that one?
So when helping goes wrong, what do we do in response to
it? Or even just tips for asking for help. Just kind of how do we do that? What's the kind of best way to? What's the best language to use, or how do we keep it really simple? I suppose.
And some of this gets into general comments on communication and how we talk to each other safely, because I think some of these things are just about how do you articulate what's going on for you as well as you can, and help people to understand it. So I mean, if someone is doing something that they think will help but it isn't helping, trying to speak to it from your perspective rather than commenting on what they're doing, to try and help them understand what it is like for you, is a bit safer. So I mean, there's lots of different theories about communication and how it can all work, but I suppose one of the key principles is to speak from your own perspectives. Use I statements, because it's much harder to disagree with I statements, and actually they're perceived as being more humble. You would think that it makes people think, oh, you're just talking about yourself all the time, but actually it's better often to talk about yourself than to talk about the other person in the room, or try and generalize as if everyone's experience is like yours. So if, for example, I were to, if someone says to me, you're not making sense, then I can say, yes, I am, because that's a comment about whether the things I'm saying make sense. And I can legitimately say, well, other people understand it. I don't know why you're having a problem with it. And we're in conflict. Whereas if someone says, I don't understand, I can't say, yes, you do. I have to take that on trust because it's their experience. So if someone's helping you and it's not, but it's not working, to be able to say to them, I really appreciate it, that I'm still feeling stuck with this. And, one of the things that's on my mind is this, and I'm worried about that. It's very hard for people to disagree with it. Whereas if you say, frankly, what you're saying is not helpful, then it's very easy to disagree with that and say, well, I've said this to other people and they found it really helpful. So that humility of going, here's what it's like for me, creates much nicer conversations, I think.
Yeah, I can remember being in an interview years ago for a job and somebody just saying, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you've just said. I just thinking, oh no, well, totally, I haven't got the job. Actually, I did get the job, but it was the first time I'd really heard somebody be that sort of direct, and it was really, really, really powerful. So one of the things that I doing action learning, you pick up sort of favorite questions, things that questions that have real power. And one of them that I think is really useful when people are asking for help is just to ask them, how would you like things to be? Because that kind of sets a destination as well, doesn't it? It gives people something to go, and then you can start to go, okay, well, what's the first thing you might do? But just how would you like things to be is I mean, it's a great question for us all to just ask ourselves, but in that help context, I think that's a really powerful one as well. So
Yeah, and also sometimes I've asked people, if you had a magic wand, what would you add to this situation to make it feel manageable? What would make this feel okay? And so it's, you can sort of partly that you can ask about what's the goal, what do you want as an end point, but you can also ask it more directly, like right now, what do you wish you had?
yeah,
And that can help people go, oh, what I wish I had is more money. And you go, right, okay, well, let's figure out what the money would have let you do. And so how can
yeah,
we get those things without the money, or how can we go and get money? Or actually what I really need is a partner to go talk this through, because I feel like I'm lost in my head. And you go, great, okay, well, let's start from there. And it's sometimes easier to think, what do I wish I had in this moment, than it is to think, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? But
yeah.
they often speak to the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah. I mean, what all of this is about, in the background, is just kindness, isn't it? And being kind to each other, and kind of not waiting to be asked, but offering help and that sort of thing. And so I thought I'm just really aware that there have been so many acts of kindness. I mean, what we've talked about a lot over the last year is how kind people have been. And we've seen neighbours helping each other, and neighbours becoming friends, and all that sort of stuff. So I thought it would be really lovely to just try and gather a little collection of acts of kindness, either something that you've done to a friend, but that might feel a bit boasty, but or just maybe something, an act of kindness that you've benefited from in the last year, something that has made you feel really special. I think if we could collect a few of those, that would be a really lovely thing to then just be able to share back with you. Yeah, we can see some coming in the chat there. So if you're just up for doing that and sharing in the chat, that would be fantastic. And while people are doing that, Andy, I just wanted to, we were talking about communication, and I suppose the whole thing about balance is that we've been talking about our minds and well-being, and trying to be really open, and I like to think that we've got lots of, we've become a little kind of community of people that are, around the balance talk, so we can talk freely and openly about this kind of stuff, and we can talk about it in the chat, and it astonishes me every time to see how willing people are to do that. But in more general terms, and particularly thinking about work, and kind of work in the creative sector, how can we encourage more open conversation about this kind of thing? It feels really important right now. There's going to be a lot of people pretending they're okay when they go back.
Yeah, it's something that we're trying to mainstream into, particularly in London, but generally we've got a campaign starting next week, actually. So if you're in London, you can keep an eye out for buses passing through South and Central London, and Kennington Tube, Borough Tube, Aldgate, a few other places. There will be a Mind Apples poster somewhere, so you can go find it, take a selfie of it. But what we're trying to do is remind people to think about the things that have helped them during lockdown, and to keep doing them, just because a lot of this is about building on what we figured out, and not seeing those things as just things that we did to cope in the moment, but actually as things that we've realized we've learned about ourselves and we need more of. So there will be negotiations, I think, to be had about that, about how do we, for example, get people working in evenings without cutting into their rest and their ability to look after themselves. But a lot of it is about us starting from thinking, what I really need are these things. This is something that's really helped me. I shouldn't just stop it now that I'm going back to being busy again. I will remember what I need to do for my mind. So I think part of it's that it's build out from what you find works for you. We actually also I've got one. We made little wallet cards of principles about how to talk about mental health. So we've been sending these particularly with schools and with people who do our champions courses. But there's kind of key principles that we've found have helped. One is, we all have mental health. Don't just treat this as something that is for a separate group of people who are struggling, but for the people who are doing well as well. So actually, one thing that's really helpful for me is hearing how successful people have managed to be successful. I would love to know what Bill Gates does for his mind to help him to stay calm and make good decisions, because he must be doing something. It's not like people are just born being brilliant at these things. They develop these skills, these capabilities, and it's really relevant to talk about that. But also, we know our own minds. Don't go around telling people what they want. Listen. It's much more about listening to what works for people and respecting that. I won't go through all of them. The other thing is the great principle of unconditional positive regard, which this comes from Carl Rogers and humanistic therapy. Whatever someone shares with you, try not to judge them for that, to just take it as a great thing that they have shared something with you, and to be glad that you understand their perspective better before leaping to going, well, that sounds like a stupid thing to do, or I don't think that would calm me down, or whatever. And so being able to hold that space to hear what people have said and to feel that, oh, that's good, I know you a bit better now, and to give ourselves a bit of room to be able to say, actually, this is the thing I need, or this is the thing I want more of, and to see what we can do to negotiate that with each other, I think is really important.
I love that unconditional positive regard. I think if I was ever going to be in a band, that might be what I might call it.
Yeah.
A very long band name, but it's a great thing. There's some lovely things coming in on the chat, but I just wanted to take a look at that. So, you know, friends who sent me some pretty herbal tea boxes, and lots of flowers being sent, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to read through these. There's some really lovely things there. What we will do is we'll share them with all of you in the follow-up blog and email, just so that you might feel inspired by some of these, or it's great to kind of what comes around goes around, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
I did want to pick up something that Caroline's put in there, actually, because it is an important point, that someone texting you to ask if you're all right in a chat group. And a lot of our interactions have been with chat groups and WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups, and that kind of thing. One thing to watch for is it's not when people just aren't checking the messages, because that usually means they're busy. The thing that to watch for is if somebody is reading every message but hasn't said anything on the chat for ages. That's often the point where it's good to just reach out and go, how are you doing? Because that can be a sign that they feel awkward, or they feel that they don't want to talk about how they are. So I just wanted to mention that, because that can be quite an important thing, I think, for checking in on people when someone seems to have retreated but they're still there, rather than they're just off having fun somewhere else. So I wanted to say that. Yeah, there's some really nice things in there that yeah, really great stuff. I'm conscious that I didn't actually encourage you to pop any questions in the chat, but do that if you've got any questions. I know there are a couple in there, and I'm going to ask Rennie to turn the camera on in a second. But I was just wanted to mention a couple of things that are coming up, just that picks up on that idea about having an open conversation, Andy, and you know about these, but and so pitch in on them. But one is that I think some of you will know that we're building a toolkit at the moment, a balanced toolkit, and we're planning an event in Mental Health Awareness Week that will coincide with the launch of that toolkit. And that toolkit, that event is not so much a kind of launch of the toolkit, but really is an opportunity for us to start a conversation with some of the people that have helped us make the toolkit and deliver this project. So the Arts Council, the Creative Industries Federation, about mental health in the creative sector and what's going on for people at the moment. And just as crucially, what do we think the story is going to be for the next 18 months, just so that we can start to have that conversation with them. So I would encourage you to keep an eye out for that in the newsletter, because we would love as many of you to come as possible. It's definitely intended to be a conversation. It'd be really useful for them to hear from you directly about what's going on. So just that's something to bear in mind in terms of having that open conversation and starting to kind of lobby a little bit at kind of policy level and development agency level. And then the other thing is that we've talked about this before in other balanced talks, is this idea of a charter. So, a charter, a mental health charter for the creative sector that both employers and freelancers can kind of get behind and know what to expect from each other. And I think, a charter, something like that, can really help to just make this conversation put this conversation much more front and center. So those are just a couple of things that we're going to try and do over the summer that will hopefully help bring those conversations to bear a bit more. And one thing I'd add to that is, just as a general principle, that I think we talk a lot about what we can do to help ourselves, but it's one of the key things about being resilient and looking after our mental health is that it's collective as well. So I think it starts with this understanding what we need and doing things that we can do for ourselves. But it is also about figuring out, what help do I need? What extra support do I need from my colleagues, from my sector, from the government, from wherever, and being able to articulate that, because actually we make the sector together. We set the culture. We decide what is acceptable and what isn't, and it starts with that awareness of knowing, actually, this is what helps me, and I'm curious about what helps you, and let's all work together to get it. Yeah, well, we are the sector, aren't we? They wouldn't be here. It's not anyone else, it's us. No, it's us. It is, absolutely. Rennie, on that point, I wondered if you might like to turn your camera on and just let us know if there are any questions that have popped up in the chat so far. I think I spotted a couple along the way, but yeah, there was. I was actually pulling them out. So there was a couple early on. So
Claire said that she lives alone. She worries about the long-term physical health effects of this period of isolation and the lack of hormones that Andy was talking about. Is there anything we can do to mitigate those hormones from anything else?
Yeah, to which the answer is on the oxytocin side, it's quite hard. It seems to be that it is very much linked to physical contact, but it doesn't have to be, with friends and loved ones, getting a massage or hugging a friend in a pub. These things, these small touches are the things that really make a big difference. But I think a lot of it's about mitigating the problems of it, because one of the things that it can do is it means that you're a bit more vulnerable to stress and to worry. So partly it's about trying to find opportunities just to have these little contact and chats with people physically face to face, but it's also about just recognizing that might make you feel a bit more on edge, and not to panic about that, and to try and do things to look after yourself. And for example, on the point about stimulation, we get a lot of stimulation from talking to people and hanging out with each other, but if you're not getting a lot of that, then actually learning things can have the same sort of effect. So actually learning a new skill or being interested in things can really help. And there is a really interesting study that suggested that if all of the negative effects of being isolated and being lonely, you can mitigate those a bit by being very true to yourself. So if you know absolutely how you want to live, what's important to you, what your values are, then it gives you a bit of protection against feeling that maybe you haven't got as many people around as you'd like. So some of it is about that truth to yourself as well.
Andy, can I just pick you up on that? I remember reading something about, I'm going to get the name wrong. It's this idea of, like, if you're with somebody and they're experiencing something and you watch them and you can experience it. So there's some mirror. There's a science term for it. Sorry, this is science memory.
Science memory kicks in. Yes,
yeah.
Eleanor's got it. Mirror neurons. Yes,
mirror neurons. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, so mirror neurons are, they're still not widely understood. The mirror neuron network in the human brain, what it seems to do is fire in sympathy for what we see other people experiencing. And so it was discovered in monkeys. They were doing research into macaque monkeys. They were scanning their brains when they eat a peanut to understand how motor neurons work, how motion is controlled. But what they found is that one of the scientists ate a peanut from the monkey's tray himself, and the monkey watched him intently. And to their surprise, the monkey's brain patterns fired in the same pattern as if it had eaten the peanut itself. So just watching the scientists seemed to trigger those same steps. Where it's not so understood is we're not sure what it covers. So some of it may be about remembering things that you've experienced. So you need to experience it yourself first in order to have that effect. So you might have more sympathy or empathy for somebody who's sad if you felt sad a lot, and it might just be easier to empathize. But it's also, some of it's about learning as well. So if you show someone how to do something, then it's partly you stepping through how that works so that you can sort of practice it without having to do it yourself. But the kind of wider network of it is all about empathy systems and emotional contagion. We pick up a lot of emotions from each other. We feel a connection to what other people are experiencing. So if someone else is feeling sad, then you'll feel sad for them. It's actually one of the things that, although it's good to realize that we can have an impact on each other, it's one of the things that often means people shut themselves off when they're depressed, is that they feel like they're bringing other people down. So part of it is about recognizing that you will feel sad for people, but not letting it dominate you, and actually trying to figure out, what can I do to help show that I'm okay, and they're all right to be sad with me. It's not overwhelming me, because it just makes people feel a bit more comfortable being upset or feeling down.
Great. There was a lot of talk and chatter, and also like some partial questions and comments. I think you picked up on it, Andy, about dealing with shame or feeling vulnerable when asking for help, and kind of any thoughts or practical tips when trying to reach out to people and push through that shame or that vulnerability.
Yeah, I talked about this a bit. Maybe Julia, you can chip in a bit with more thoughts on that. How do we overcome that feeling of, I suppose it's the shoulds, isn't it? It's the I should know how to do this, or I shouldn't ask for help with this, or there's a lot of that pressure of expectations with it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big one for me. I think it's about, for me, it really helped just thinking about why am I asking for help? I'm asking for help because I want things to be better, or I want to be able to do this thing better, or whatever. So thinking about where the help will get you to, I find really useful as well. I'm asking this because I want the world to be a better place, or da da da. And so if I ask for this help, then that will be the case. But also it's that thing about that we were saying, that people basically people want to help. So there's no, there's I would say don't worry about it, because most people will want to help, and it's often it's something that feels really big to you. I often say this to people: I totally don't mind you talking to you about this, because I know how to do this. It'll take me 20 minutes to explain it to you, but actually it will change your world and mean that you go from being really anxious about this thing to feeling like you can do it. And if I can make that difference in 20 minutes, and that's probably the best 20 minutes I'm going to spend this week. So I think also just be aware of how you're helping the other person. I love to be helpful, and I know it's all about balance, but so that's how I would get past it. I think actually this other person will probably be really pleased that I've reached out to them to ask them for help, because they don't want me to be struggling and worried and anxious. I mean, nobody wants that for anyone, do they? So that would probably be my one. I think it's a very human response, but yeah.
And some of it is about just feeling that you are doing what you can to solve the problem, even if that is very limited. But at least you can say to yourself, well, I'm doing what I can with it, but I also need help. It feels a bit, you can ask with a bit more integrity, a bit more confidence. I am genuinely stuck. It's not that I just haven't even thought about it and I'm asking for help. I really have hit a wall here, and I really do need some help with this. But I think, as I said before, part of it's about the specific asks, rather than just feeling that you're just overwhelmed and stuck, to be able to say, actually, I need a bit of help getting my confidence back, or I need a bit of advice on this particular thing, or I feel like I know how to do this, but I'm worried that maybe there's some stuff that's happened that I haven't noticed. So it'd be great, just tell me if there's anything I'm missing or that I should look into. The way that we ask it, I think, is helpful for that as well. I should also add, we don't talk much about shame, but shame is quite an interesting concept. It's not the same as guilt. Guilt is feeling bad about something you did. Shame is feeling bad about yourself. So it's often that point where it stops being just, I feel bad about asking for help, and starts feeling like the fact that I'm asking for help means I'm bad. And so watch for that moment where you're not anymore thinking about the thing, but you started to make that about you generally. That's often the thing to watch for, is that you can feel guilty that you didn't respond to someone's email. But if it makes you think, actually, I'm the sort of person who's unreliable and I'm therefore a bad friend, then it's become more about shame. And that's where it's all really good to talk it through with people.
There's a really interesting question that came in. So asking a friend for for advice, for help, and then them immediately insisting a solution, and then not taking no for an answer. And so the question was, how do I articulate that I just want to vent sometimes without having to have a resolve, without creating offense to the person, then insisting that this is the route to all your problems to be solved.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes that is just the way that people want to respond, is that they feel like solving the problem is the bit that they can do. So it's partly playing to their strengths. But sometimes I would say partly it's the question you ask. If you say, I need help solving this problem, or you just say, I'm really stuck with this thing, then you will get that response. But if you say, I'm feeling like I've lost my confidence, or I don't know how I can use my skills to solve this problem, you ask that different question, then their advice becomes the wrong answer, because it's a different question you're asking. So sometimes it's about thinking back to what question have I actually asked them to help me with here? Have I inadvertently given them the impression that what I want is for them to tell me an answer, when actually probably what I want is, can just tell me if I'm missing anything here, or can I just talk this through to get it clear in my mind? These things make it harder for people to respond with, I've got the solution, because it's a different question. It wouldn't be appropriate to respond like that.
I think also because it was about somebody just the need to vent, wasn't it? I think sometimes it could be, maybe it's just really useful on a really practical level to text someone and say, look, is it okay if I phone you later? I just need to vent. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Just need to let off some steam. And it's the kind of thing that you would do down the pub naturally, isn't it, with a friend or something like that? But just maybe just being really clear about what you need from them as a friend at that point. But if it feels a bit weird doing that in the conversation, then just giving them the heads up about what you want from them at that moment might be useful.
I think that was about it, really. I've been making a note, so yeah.
Thank you, Renee.
That's all right.
Thanks very much. Thank you. I wondered if, I feel like I'm summoning people, but I know that, so some of you that have been before will know that Sarah, lovely Sarah Singleton, has been busy scribbling away, making a little graphic illustration of all the things that that we've all been talking about. Sarah, I wondered if you could join us and maybe just show us what you've come up with today. It was lovely to see this.
Hello, yeah, I'm just coming.
Brilliant, thank you.
Trying to get it to
So I don't know
sync.
if you've not seen one of Sarah's graphic illustrations before, then you're in for a treat. I don't quite know how she manages to get all of this done.
Do you know what? It was very abstract today. I was like, oh, there's a lot more writing here than there usually is. But yeah, it's good
Great
fun.
stuff. So those of you that are new, I know we've got some new people today. Sarah will be sharing that with you. So if you want to kind of refer back to it, if you're someone that thinks visually, then there's a little paddling pool in there. Is there a paddling
Well, that
pool?
was the pooling the resources. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Very good. Very good. Brilliant. So we'll share that with you after the talk, just seeing if you want to kind of come back and have a little look at it. That will be there for you. Thank you, Sarah. I know you've got to dash off to another session.
Yeah, thanks.
So, but
Take
thank you very much for that. Brilliant. Thank you. So I just wanted to, we're coming to the end, we're just about to wrap up. I just wanted to do a few sort of parish notices before I invite you all back on to turn on your cameras. So I mentioned the toolkit or the launch event that we're doing on the 14th of May. So if you are able to hold that, we think it's probably going to be in the morning. We're just lining up some speakers, but we're hoping that we'll have somebody there from the Arts Council, somebody from the Creative Industries Federation. Andy and I will be there, and hopefully a couple of artists as well. And we would love you to join us for that conversation about what's going on in the sector at the moment and what do we think we're going to need going forward. We'd love you to join us. So that's on the 14th of May, and it will coincide with the launch of the toolkit, which is keeping all of us pretty busy, I think it's fair to say. So those of you that don't know what I'm talking about here, we're building a toolkit which will help you both balance your books and your mind. So help you to think not only about how you can look after your mind and protect your well-being, but also how once you're feeling healthy and better and good and strong and all those sorts of things, you can then start to apply that energy and that motivation to building a stronger career and business. So the toolkit will cover both of those areas, and we're busy building all of that as we speak, and it will be ready for Mental Health Awareness Week, all being well. So just wanted to let you know about that. Andy, thank you as ever. Packed in lots there, I think lots for us to think about. So thank you for joining us again. Thank you, Renee, for keeping an eye on the chat and for hosting us so brilliantly. And thank you, Sarah, for the brilliant illustration. I'd love to invite you all to turn your cameras back on if you are happy to do that, those of you that are. For those of you that are new, we like to have a little kind of together goodbye moment, and that typically involves us doing something silly in front of the camera or something that's kind of, quite visual. And we did have an idea for this morning, and then we changed it at about 5 to 10. So this may all go horribly wrong, but what we're going to ask you to do, and this was Sarah's suggestion, you see that she's ducked out of the call, so she's obviously not confident of our abilities to pull this one off. We're going to do the Makaton sign for kindness. And so this is basically you put your finger down like that, and then when you bring your hands up, it's a thumb. So finger down, thumb up. If you want to make it a bit disco, you can do a kind of thing like that. I don't know if that's disco, that's just probably me being quite old. But I'm going to get you to, we're going to do that all together on the count of 3, and then Renee's going to try and take a picture so that we capture this forever in posterity as we do the sign for kindness, which feels like a very opposite thing for us to do. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, let's be kind. And a few times. There you go. Brilliant stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you all again today. I hope it was useful. Hope it was inspiring. We will share with you all of the notes from the chat, the keynotes from the chat. We'll share the recording with you, Sarah's illustration. But of course, if you've got any questions, anything like that, do keep in touch. We love to hear from you, know what you're getting on with. And hopefully we will see you on the 14th of May. Take care, everyone.